Well, hi, and welcome to another episode of Unstoppable Mindset. Today, our guest is Prince Khan, who lives up in Canada, in Ontario, as I recall. He is a business professional. He helps a lot of people who are in the business of being entrepreneurs or who want to be entrepreneurs, and does a lot of interesting things from what I've read, and I'm not going to give it away because it's more fun to let him talk about it. But Prince, I want to welcome you to Unstoppable Mindset, and thank you very much for being here.
A pleasure, Michael. Thank you so much for having me.
So I love to start by asking people to do something that you had suggested that you wanted to do anyway, and that is to tell us about the younger Prince growing up and where you come from and all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely. So we immigrated to Canada in 97. I remember it was August, and it was early August, around I think August 5th or 6th. And we had come to Canada with about $10,000 in our pocket.
And where did you come from?
We came from Pakistan.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so we thought about the Canadian dream, and my dad had really had high ambitions of coming to Canada and finding a job in engineering, which he specialized in back in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, as well as Pakistan. We came here and we were struggling. And we were living in poverty-like conditions for the longest time. And my dad was struggling to find a job. My parents ended up working in factories. My brother ended up having to move further out to try to secure some rent for the family. So it was challenging times when I was younger. And one of the things that I remember is we couldn't afford to really focus on my education or like my entertainment. Mm-hmm. And majority of the time, I was really just put on the side. And I really struggled growing up and going to school. You know, if I was in grade 6, I was reading at a grade 3 level. And it was quite the challenge. And growing up, it was so difficult. But now that I'm 32 years old, I've actually completed my master's. I teach at a university. I also provide a lot of support to startups and entrepreneurs within the local community in Ontario. And I've really come far from where I really thought I could have been when I was younger.
Well, what do you think the reasons were that when you all came over from Pakistan, and clearly with some very high hopes, why was it such a struggle in the beginning, do you think?
The thing is, I think coming to a new country, the integration piece of new immigrants, even refugees, it's quite difficult because a lot of people don't see your experience from back home as relevant experience in the country that you come to. So when my dad came here, even though he had years and years of engineering experience, they still didn't take him because, number one, his age, he was over 50 years old. Mm-hmm. And two, they didn't see his international experience as relevant Canadian experience. So the problem was that because they didn't see that, he couldn't integrate well into society. So he ended up doing a lot of labor jobs. My mom never worked in her life, but she had to end up working in a factory alongside him just to make things meet or make our financials meet at the end of the month and pay our rent and try to just survive.
Did he eventually, or did they eventually kind of break through the barrier? And did he ever get a chance to go back into engineering?
No, he didn't. Unfortunately, he ended up doing security until he retired. But fortunately enough for his kids, me, my brother, and my sister became really big in real estate. My brother ended up working for a large bank for about 25 years now. And I teach now. I work for the government. So the kids were able to get established. And there was an interesting point one of my co-professors made when I had a conversation with him. He said, I'm generation 1.5. So it's a generation that doesn't get all the benefits, but still get some reward from the aspirations of the first generation.
Your brother and sister are older than you?
Absolutely, yeah. So my brother is 11 or 12 years older, and my sister is around 10 years older.
Mm. Yeah, it seemed like they were older since he's been in the banking industry for a long time, and she's been successful in real estate. But you're getting there too, which is also important. But it is so sad that you had to experience, or your parents had to experience, not having any real level of acceptance for their international experience. And it's not exactly the same, but I know for me as a person who is blind, we get when you could either say diminished or demeaned or just negated a lot simply because people think that eyesight's the only game in town.
Right.
And it's so unfortunate that people do that. And I have yet to really figure out how to break through that. I think we're talking about it more, and I think that's part of the conversation. And I would hope that people in Canada might think of future immigrants as being a little bit more able to be part of the culture than maybe what happened with your father's generation.
Correct. So there is a little bit of better integration now that's coming across. In Canada specifically, they're certifying engineers a lot more quickly. Doctors, same thing. So they've realized that they've brought in all these people with all these expertise, but they're all doing labor jobs. And unfortunately, we have all this talent, but that talent is going to it's going to waste at the end of the day. So the Canadian government has kind of figured it out that let's try to certify these individuals as soon as possible so they can get into the workforce and add to our professional economy.
Yeah, that's really the issue. And if there are certifications and programs that they have to go through, then okay, great, but let's do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so again, I hope that in the future, maybe we've learned some lessons. I know we've heard down here some news about some of the struggles of Indigenous personnel up in Canada whose children were sent to schools and taken completely out of their homes, and all the challenges and horrible things that happened with that. We've all had very funny illustrations and examples of where people aren't really using their vision or their imagination very well. I mean, vision in the sense of intelligence and imagination.
Correct. Yeah. So at the end of the day, you have to realize that there's more to society than just what's out there. You need to be inclusive and understand the diversity of what makes your country so unique, and make sure that you're accounting for everybody that lives within society.
Why did you have a lot of challenges with reading and so on growing up, do you think?
Number one, I didn't have interest. I didn't care. I remember, don't tell my grade 6 teacher this, but I had my brother read a lot of my books. He read the books, he did the analysis, and whenever we would have these reading circles, I would have no idea what's going on because I didn't read those books. I didn't write my papers. So I really tried to wing it in the sense that I tried to fake it till I make it. And I realized that I failed at that relatively quickly, because when we came into those group circles and we were talking about, what was the main message that we received in the chapters that we had to read, I would never really have any response. And the teacher would get confused, like, did you not read the book? EQAO or any of those sort of things where we were tested. I was always a C to D student, and never could get Bs. If I was lucky, I may get 1 or 2 Bs. The majority of the time, education was just not my priority, and I always found it to be at the very end of whatever I like to do. And I always like to hang out with my friends, and that's all I wanted to do. It might have come from the fact that my parents couldn't really give me that education or that handholding because they themselves were struggling.
What turned it around?
The unstoppable mindset. So I realized eventually, once I graduated high school, that I had to make something of myself, because at a certain age, you reach a point where you have to make these life decisions. Do you really want to spend the rest of your life doing absolutely nothing, or do you want to spend your life making something of yourself? So when I got into college, that was my first drive and my first ambition. And as I told you, I struggled with education, but in college, I was able to get a good grades, and I was able to actually succeed. It got better in my undergrad, even though I was still scared and nervous. Still found it to be challenging. I came out with a high ranking in terms of my grades. And then recently, I just did my master's, so I just completed the full 360 in terms of education. And I got the best grades in my master's program only because I learned from those pillars that I had built. And it was that unstoppable mindset. I knew I could do better and better and better each time. So I built those pillars of success and eventually get where I am today.
So what degree did you get for your bachelor's and then your master's?
So in my bachelor's, I did my undergrad in business, more specifically management. And then in my master's, I did it in economic development and innovation, where we look to support communities in terms of investment attraction, expansion, retention, as well as entrepreneurship and small business.
What made you decide to go into business?
Initially, I didn't really see much skills for myself. Like, I'll be honest with you. I didn't really see myself in sciences. I didn't really see myself in art. I think I almost failed art in grade 9. So I realized very quickly that art was not my thing. But business was something that was more generic. I was like, okay, let me go in, let me try it out, see how I'll do. I was very nervous because going from high school to college in any capacity is very nerve-wracking. But I went there and ended up enjoying it. I took finance when I went to college. And then once I graduated, I went to university, took business there in terms of management. But what drove me there was the fact that it seemed like an easier option compared to a lot of other things out there. And I just wanted to explore it to see if it's something I liked. And fortunately enough, it was something I really thrived in. And I ended up doing as a full-time thing in terms of my career.
Did you think that maybe business was just going to be sort of slam dunk and easy, or did you not approach it that way at all compared to like science and so on? Because obviously it sounds like you had some fears and some concerns and so on. Did you just think business was going to be easier, or it's just you were nudged to go that way?
Yeah, so my mentor originally was my brother, and he said, you know what, the entire family has been in business. My brother's been at the bank, my sister's been. He said, why don't you just try it? If you don't like it, then you can always pivot and change afterwards and get into something else. So I was like, sure, why not? So I just gave it a shot. And I realized once I took the finance program at the college that business was something I actually was good at. I failed in school, in high school, in middle school, and elementary because most of the courses I was taking weren't really related to what I enjoyed. So when I got to college, I actually enjoyed studying because it was more related to some of the things that were specific to something that excites me, something I'm a little bit more passionate about. And that went into university as well as my master's program.
So you really liked the theory. It just really clicked with you, and there you are.
Exactly. And if it didn't click with me, then I would have realized very quickly that I need to pivot into something else. But I really found it exciting. I really found it to be something that I could use in my practical life. So that's why I decided to pursue it.
And that's really the important thing, right? I mean, it's all about finding something that you not only discover that you're good at, but you discover that you really like and that you can make practical use of, which is always a good thing. It doesn't really get a whole lot better than that, does it?
Yeah, you have to enjoy what you do, right? And you have to enjoy what you study. If you're taking a degree just because your parents are telling you to take a degree and you don't really want to do it because it's just not something you're passionate about or you really enjoy, then you shouldn't be getting into something that you're not going to find value in the future. But if you genuinely enjoy it, if you genuinely want to learn, at that point, education becomes a huge piece. And then you try to figure out what is it that you really enjoy as an individual.
Yeah. So you went ahead and you got your business degrees. And did you have any thought as to exactly what you were going to do with them while you were going through your whole college program, or what?
I had no idea. So when I finished my finance diploma, I'm like, okay, I'm going to get a job in accounting somewhere. And I remember I was being hired for a job by this entrepreneur named Steve Ostrowski. He became a great friend of mine. And I remember during their interview, he's like, okay, we've called you in for the accounts receivable, accounts payable position, but I just want to let you know that the position is already taken. Here's a sales job. You go do it. If you enjoy it, then you can stay with the company. So it was a complete pivot. But one thing I really admired about Steve was that he let me into the company. I did a job that I hated for 3 to 4 months, only to get promoted into being the central person of that company, and then being able to really learn about entrepreneurship. And that's where a spark really came for small business. And when I worked at the company out of Milton, Ontario, it was just so fascinating to learn about all the different facets of business, from logistics, supply chain, accounting, finance, administration. And at that point, I knew that entrepreneurship was something that I really wanted to pursue.
And what exactly does that mean? What did you want to do with it?
Coaching, advising, or running my own business. I knew I never wanted to work for a large corporation. I knew I didn't want to work for a big five firm of any sort. I wanted to work for a smaller company because I knew smaller companies face a lot more challenges with respect to sustaining the organization. And I always wanted to be that pillar that could come within an organization and help them grow to the level that they want to. So when I joined the city and I joined the region, from a government perspective, the services we provide are absolutely free. And I'm able to go out there and support all the entrepreneurs and all the small businesses. And the benefit I get from it is not monetary, it's more the respect and the passion that I see from these individuals. And I absolutely love what I do just because it drives me every day to see their success.
And the emotional rewards of you actually seeing success, and your success comes from seeing, at least in part, success of others.
Absolutely. That's what I enjoy more than seeing myself grow, to be honest with you. I love seeing others succeed because it allows me to be that backbone and say, you know what, I was able to help them get to where they want to be. So in a way, it's kind of like life coaching, but for a small business. So I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And from when I did my master's, I realized that I was in the right field. I knew I found my passion and I knew I found what I was driven to do in my life.
Now, you had an interest, I believe, in wanting to be an educator, and that didn't work out well for you?
Initially, yeah. So I remember back in 2017, I applied to a number of different Masters of Education programs because I wanted to be a teacher. And I struggled initially because a lot of the programs rejected me. And I remember I used to sit at the table and look at the rejection paper and say, no, I don't think this dream is ever going to become a reality. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to teach. This is coming from someone who absolutely hated education to going to loving education to the point that he wants to teach. So when I was staring at that rejection letter, I'm like, no, this rejection means I got to try harder. And eventually I got an opportunity to teach, but it was through a referral and we were able to make it work and I was able to find my passion. But if I decided to just give up and say, you know what, teaching is not for me, people keep rejecting me, I would have probably not taken the opportunity. But even though all the odds were stacked against me, I still decided to do it. And I proved myself over and over again and now have become a solid pillar in the institution that I teach at.
Where do you teach?
So I teach at the University of Guelph, located out of Toronto, Ontario.
Okay. But the issue is that you got into it, in a sense, in a little bit different way, because you went to work for a company, you developed a lot of experience at that company, you learned about entrepreneurship, and somebody finally saw that, well, maybe Prince has really got something that we need.
Yeah, and he doesn't need a master's of education to do so, right? Prince has got that drive.
But you got a master's, and it's in a different field, which makes it all the more valuable in a way.
Yeah, but the master's came after. That's the funny thing, right? I didn't even have my master's when I started.
Yeah.
So it came afterwards. And it was really because one thing that I want to let everyone on the podcast know, the more you give back, the more you see in return. So the students were a part of this program called DECA, which is basically a business competition for students. And I was heavily involved in the DECA competition with the students and mentoring and training a lot of these students at the university. And a lot of them went on to win top 3 placements. And then the program head saw this and, he was like, wow, like, when are you going to come and teach? Are you able to teach? And I said, absolutely. If you give me an opportunity, I will. So we figured a way around it. And even though I didn't have my master's, I was able to get into it. So if I had just said, you know what, I don't want to help anybody. I'm so rejected. I don't care about getting my master's anymore, I would have given up, right? Mm-hmm. But that's not me. I'm the type of person that's going to figure a way around it. So my way around it was, how do I volunteer my time? How do I give back to the community? How do I show myself and my self-worth to the people and the right people that will get me in positions where I need to be?
And to yourself.
And to myself, exactly.
Yeah, which is definitely a part of it, because if you're really not convinced about yourself, then how are you going to convince anyone else?
Absolutely. So the confidence factor has to really be strong. And you have to be confident that you can pull through regardless of how many times you get rejected or how many people say no.
Do you have any notion of why you got so many rejections? Did you ever ask anyone or try to get some feedback about what was really going on?
No, because rejection is, when people get rejected, they automatically assume they're not good enough, right? And I've realized actually over the past 2 3 years that rejection is sometimes a good thing because it makes you realize that it's not that you're not good enough. It's just you maybe have made a mistake, or maybe you didn't live up to that expectation of what they were expecting, right? And it'll teach you to be more humble, because if you think that you can get any job, you can get into any position because of all the experiences and the knowledge that you have, there's people out there that are always going to be better than you, right? And getting rejected doesn't mean that you're bad. It just means that somebody out there was better than you. So you just want to learn from those experiences. So nowadays, what I'm doing is I'm going back and saying, "Oh, that's perfectly fine that you rejected me. I'm happy that you found someone that fits your organization or fits what you're looking for. Where did I go wrong? How can I improve myself?" So I've learned to become more humble through rejection, and that's one of the key skills you need. Rejection is actually becoming a skill for me now, because with rejection, you learn, and then you succeed.
And that's why I asked the question. I was just curious what you do, because you have grown a lot. If you went back to investigate with any of those people, what their thoughts were, whether they would even remember about why they rejected you. And clearly, if you have faith in the system, you're going to believe that they rejected you for reasons, but sometimes knowing those reasons can be valuable too.
Absolutely. And I encourage everybody who's ever been rejected to find out why. Don't take it personally, but find out why. And I've learned recently, like I said, that to find out why you failed, or why you struggled, or why you didn't get something that you really wanted, there's no harm in that, right? You're learning from that experience, and then you're going to take it, and then you're going to move on, and then you're going to do better next time because you've taken that knowledge of why you struggled or why you didn't do the way you wanted to do. So
there you go. The fact is that we focus too much on this whole concept of failure. And I agree with the people who say failure not only isn't a bad thing, but failure is just an opportunity for you to learn how to advance and grow and maybe do it better the next time. It's not a bad thing at all. And we shouldn't consider it a failure. For years, it's a little unrelated, but I've been using guide dogs for, it'll be 50. Well, it is now 59 years. Wow. I got my first guide dog on, I think, like about the 1st of July of 1964. So it's over 59 years. Anyway, for years, the dogs that didn't make it were called failures. And there were rejects and all sorts of terms. And somebody at one of the schools finally realized what an unfair label to put on the dog, because the reality is less than half of the dogs will make it as guide dogs. And that's because, like with any job in any one, you're not necessarily cut out to do that job. There are so many things that go into being a guide dog, like not panicking at sounds, not being distracted easily, so many different things, learning to really focus and all that. And what they learned is they should call them career changed, which is a much more appropriate term. Some of them go on to do other careers. They will work as service dogs elsewhere. Some have gone to police departments. Some have gone to be seizure detection dogs or cancer detection dogs. And some just go back to their puppy raisers and become well-trained dogs in someone's home. But rejects is really the wrong term. And we allow ourselves to dwell on that way too much in our own lives, it seems to me.
Absolutely. We all have our own special skill sets, our own special way of doing things, and we can't white label everybody to be the same, right? Regardless of how close you are with someone or how competitive someone is in terms of their skill set with you, you have to learn that the decisions that are made, it's not because you are bad, just like the guide dogs, right? It's because maybe you were meant to do something different and something more unique.
And it can be the trick, but the opportunity is really to find out what it is you're good at, or in the case of a guide dog that is career change and doesn't become a guide dog, what their real role ought to be. And they're not as much involved in, other than by demonstrating their talents, what that decision will be. But we certainly can. And we should look at, what are we good at? What do we really want to do? And then go after it, like you said.
Yeah, you have to enjoy what you do, right? So some dogs may not enjoy being guide dogs because they're more outgoing and they have a lot of energy, right?
That's one option. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're the type of person that has a different personality, explore who you are, right? Don't assume that because society has labeled you as, somebody who's not capable or whatnot. Don't assume that's who you are. That's what society thinks you are, but you can always create something of yourself by actually finding your passion and finding really where you will thrive.
And it's also true that society may view you in a way that you don't want to be viewed as, or in a way that's inappropriate, which really ought to cause you to look at, what messages am I sending that makes them think that?
Right. So self-reflection becomes a huge piece of that.
Yeah. And it's important to really deal with that and grow.
Absolutely.
But, I wanted to be a teacher. A different job came along, so I never had a rejection sort of a thing. But I also learned along the way that when the other job came along, what did I end up doing more than anything else? Teaching, dealing with technology and so on. And then I was put in a position where I had to choose to either be laid off from a company or change from more of a scientific research job that I was doing to go into sales, because the company didn't have enough revenue producers. They had moved me back from California to Boston to join the company, and I chose to do that.
Right.
And then this VP of marketing called me in and said, we got to let you go because we don't have enough revenue producers. And what you do is great and you're doing well, but you're not a revenue producer unless you want to go into sales. And I love to tell people I lowered my standards and went from science to sales. But the reality is, once again, what I learned, and I had the opportunity to really get some incredible sales training. What is sales? Sales is really teaching and counseling and advising and learning. So you get to be a student and a teacher if you're doing it right.
Correct. Yeah, sales is one of the key skills you need in life. And I run a program for students that's funded by the government of Ontario, where they get a grant of $3,000. And I always educate my students on, when you're going door to door, how are you going to do that pitch? How are you going to reach out to those customers and entice them to make a purchase, right? So instead of going with the conversation of, hi, my name is so-and-so and I clean cars, you walk up to the door and say, that's a nice car outside. Do you maintain it? Or does someone that you know that maintains it? Or do you want someone to help you maintain that car? Yeah. Going in with a different conversation, that's what sales is. It's a art at the end of the day. And that art is very valuable in your life because it'll help you get further in life, because people will believe what you have to say more than if you're just talking about facts and fiction.
Yeah, I think it's both an art and a science. There are right. Components to both, but you're absolutely right. Well, why is it that you hated sales early on? I gather you don't really hate sales anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was never the phone type of person. So when I was the company in Milton, Ontario, I used to pick up the phone and I had to do cold calling, and they were all outbounding calls. And I would talk to my wife every day, and at the time she was my girlfriend, and I said, I hate my life. I hate my life. I hate my life over and over again. But that took a lot of courage. And no one said sales is easy. You're going to get things shut in your face. You're going to get people saying no. You're going to get people yelling at you and screaming at you and making you feel degraded. But at the end of the day, if you can overcome those challenges and the hate that you get, it makes you a stronger person. You're not going to be scared when you go into a conversation and someone says, well, I don't want it. At that point, you're going to be like, okay, that's fine. Right. And then you learn to maybe improvise in terms of your sales tactic, or if the person is really hesitant on making a purchase, then you move on. But sales is the core of this world, because how do companies generate revenue? Mm-hmm. It's the sales department.
It's the sales department. And a lot of times when people are hesitant or just say they don't want it, it's also appropriate to say, tell me more about that. What's the issue? because a lot of times people are in the habit of saying no up front, and then you've got to and should explore it, which doesn't mean you're going to try to force something down their throat, but it's important to understand it. And I have found that when people say not interested, I will ask, well, tell me more about why that's an issue, because you're working for a company. I've seen many like what you do, and you need or ought to have this kind of a product. Tell me more about it. And you develop a relationship. You still may not make the sale, but you'll learn more, and you may make friends that will help you later on.
Absolutely, because it's a process, and you're right. It's getting someone to know you, getting them to like you, getting them to trust you, and then getting them to buy from you, or at least refer you out to someone else. Sales is not about going in with the intention of selling. Sales is going in with the intention of building that relationship, and you've hit it right on the mark with those comments.
The best salesperson I ever hired told me when I asked him, "What are you going to be selling for our company?" He said, "The only thing I can really sell is myself and my word, and I would expect you to back me up. The rest of it is stuff. The products are stuff. I can talk to you all day about the products, but that's not really what I'm selling. I can only sell me and my word." And he was right. And he's the only person in the number of people that I ever interviewed who was wise enough to say that. But he was absolutely right. And it was always the answer I was looking for. So needless to say, it was not a challenge to want to hire him. And I did. And he was the best sales guy I ever had working with me, because I also believe that the other side of that is being a boss. And a boss shouldn't be a person that goes in and just tells people what to do. I always told him and everyone that I ever hired that as your supervisor, my job is to add value to what you do. And what you and I need to do as a team of two is figure out how I best add value to enhance you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And and again, the people who got that did flourish and used and learned the talents that I brought to them that could help them, which is part of what it's all about.
Exactly. Right. It's really building on the value, and people don't buy products. They buy people, or what is the representation of the people in your organization, the culture of that organization, or the sales team. Right. So absolutely. The value has to be so strong from not just a product perspective, but the people perspective as well. It's a juggling game at the end of the day, but the people are what essentially make that sale happen.
Yeah. My favorite sales story is, I was traveling to Pittsburgh to see a customer, and we were supposed to be shipping some product to him, and it was supposed to arrive the day that I was going to meet him. And I'd never met him before, talked on the phone a lot. And he called while I was in the air the day before and reached one of my colleagues. And she went and investigated and discovered that the product hadn't shipped.
Oh.
And he said, "Well, wait a minute. I'm supposed to be meeting Mike Hinkson tomorrow. And what's the deal?" He said he saw it on the dock. And of course, she immediately started laughing because she knew I was blind. And he said, "What's so funny?" And so she told him, and he said, "I didn't know he was blind." And he said, "What do you mean he saw it on the dock?" So when he finally met me, he was fine, but of course he had to give me a hard time. "What do you mean you saw it on the dock?" I said, "To see in the dictionary is not necessarily to be able to just use your eyes, it's to perceive. I went out and touched them. What's the deal?" "Well, they didn't ship." And so I called and found out that our president did something that he shouldn't have done, but he reallocated it, which was unfortunate. And we worked through it and all that. But what he learned out of that was that when I say that I saw it on the dock, I went out and touched it and made sure that the labels were right. And I had no control over what the president did, which was unfortunate. But it actually enhanced our relationship, which was cool.
Yeah. See a scenario like that. It was that relationship that you built from that conversation that probably was able to help you secure that client better than just the product.
And years later, after September 11th, I happened to be doing a speech in Pittsburgh. He had retired and he came. And he said, "I just had to come and renew acquaintance and say hello." And
Wow.
and that was great. And it's always kind of cool. When I talked about teaching, I did do student teaching, and some of my students, even years later, have come up to me. And of course, I now have voices that are a lot different than when they were in 8th grade in high school, but they remember me, and boy, that's as good as it gets. When they say kind things, that's about a teacher. That's always good. Well, that's the way I always felt about my teachers as well. So I appreciated it.
Yeah, it's a very humbling experience. It's more of giving back as a teacher, because you really become a history in the student's life and their journey for that
Yeah.
year or 2 years or however long they take you, right? And once that journey is over and they've moved on, they're going to remember you. And if you leave a good impression, they're going to come back and respect you for everything that you've done for them.
Yeah.
If you leave a bad impression, it's going to be a different story, right? So you always want to be that humble individual that can build a solid brand for not just yourself, but the community around you.
Yeah. It's so important to do that. We just don't need to be too full of ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the worst thing you can possibly do. People love talking about themselves, but at the end of the day, you also want to learn about who's on the other side of the fence.
Yeah. And it's important to learn about them too. That's part of the whole science and art of understanding people. Well, when you got your bachelor's and so on, you said you went to work for a company. You worked there for 6 years, was it?
So I worked at the city of Brampton for about 5 years.
Mm-hmm. And then what did you go off and I guess you went off to do what you're doing now, which is teaching?
So it's part and parcel of it is teaching, but I've grown into becoming a business consultant at one of the regional level organizations in Ontario. And what I do is I provide a lot of pro bono free consulting for companies looking to start their business. We go through budget forecasts, market research, marketing, and I work with mainly startups to really get them off on the right foot.
And that's really the time to work with companies, because the inertia hasn't become so strong that you have to break through a lot of things as difficult as it can be, as opposed to having people who at least hopefully are a little bit more open to listening to what you have to say.
Yeah. When you get to the larger corporations, they have this set structure, and if you come in with a different mindset, it's hard for them to change. And I watched this really neat video by a guy named Stefan Grosselbach, and he talks about innovation and how smaller companies can innovate because they're very agile. But larger corporations can't, because they have these set structures. And for them to create discovery or discover new innovation, it's hard for them. So with startups, they enjoy getting the feedback, taking it, implementing it, and then if they succeed, great, they can sell that idea or grow that idea. If they fail, they move on. With a large corporation, you have large stakeholders involved and shareholders even that will hold you accountable if you have any sort of failure. So it gives startups more ability to really expand a lot faster. And it gives them more autonomy in terms of the control that they have. So that's what I really enjoy, is coming up with a new idea, expressing the idea, and then making a viable business out of it as well.
And again, it goes back to establishing those great relationships.
Absolutely. And all the clients that I deal with, it's always, I make them my priority. I make sure that they get all the information that they need, and then they remember me. I had one client reach out to me, I'd say a year later, and he said, "Prince, you helped me last year. I'm so thankful for everything that you did for me." And it was a long email, and I was not expecting it. But at the end of the day, it's the people-to-people relationship that you build that's going to be in other people's mind. So the relationship you build with the people that you talk to, that's how they're going to remember you. And you have to remember to create a brand that is going to be memorable, but also a brand that people are going to respect. So I do that with a lot of my clients. I train them to the best of my ability, let them fly, and they always come back and always, thank me for all the things that I've been able to do for them. And that's the biggest reward for the job that I do.
Do they come back sometimes and say, "Here's where we are in the scheme of things. Can you help us even grow more?"
Absolutely. I've had those situations, and situations where they need employees, or they're struggling with revenue numbers and they're trying to figure out new revenue streams. So we strategize all sorts of different things and try to figure out how can we really improve the bottom line for this company? How can we change their mindset to maybe think about not just hiring an employee, but maybe they need other resources that may be able to supplement sort of some of the things that they're offering already. So it's really a holistic approach that I take. And yeah, absolutely. I do get clients all the time that come back and say, I've reached my peak. Can you get me to the next level?
What do you do to really work to make yourself the best that you can be every day?
The best I can be is based on a positive and unstoppable mindset, right? Going back to this podcast, I know that the individuals that I work with are there because they're facing challenges. They're facing a barrier. They have a problem that, they need to start a business because they can't afford to live on EI anymore, or they want to turn their life around, or they have a business idea and they want to run with it. You're going to come with all sorts of situations, some clients in good situations, other clients in positive or negative situations, but you always have to have that positive mindset and teach them that the value of entrepreneurship and where it can really take you, and teaching them that when you start to run your own business, it really is that unstoppable mindset, because you have to be consistently ambitious, consistently taking risks, and consistently having this positive attitude as well. So what keeps me up in terms of my job is having that positive energy and making sure that the people around me also feed off that energy to really help them scale and grow their company.
So even with all the confidence and the other things that you are experiencing, which is always a good thing, do you occasionally still have times that you end up facing challenges that you're not sure how to solve?
From a business perspective, absolutely, right? I'm not a master of anything. There are certain times where I don't have the answers. And unfortunately, that happens. And we're human beings, and we're not digital technology, obviously. I mean, AI is out there now, but you have to look at other resources on how this person can get that same level of support. Is there someone else I can reach out to, another network in my community that I can say, hey, I have this contact? And I generally do that. If there are problems or barriers that I'm facing, I look out to external resources. And I'll be honest with you, because I've built such a positive relationship with the people around me, they're more than willing to just say, Prince, I got you. Or Prince, happy to help you out. That's the type of person you want to be. And that's the type of person I am. And it helps my clients because then they are able to get connected to the resource that can help them.
What gets even more exciting is the time when you have to reach out to someone who you don't even know, but you are courageous enough, as some people would probably put it, to reach out, and you get to build a whole new relationship, which is so cool.
Yeah, I've done that many, many times. And there are contacts I'm thinking about in terms of our center and all the services that we offer for small businesses. And I see a contact and I just, for example, reach out and say, hey, I'm seeing all the great things you're doing on social media, or I see your profile. Would you be open to just a quick 15-minute conversation so I can learn more about you? I build that relationship, and a lot of these clients or these individuals that I meet, they end up actually becoming a great resource to the center. And I become sort of that pillar of becoming that relationship builder within our center and our community. And I feel proud of that, right? It makes me feel better because our community has just gotten some more community champions that are able to support one another.
Mm. It is so fun. It's always fun to grow. It's always fun to learn and to try to do better and make yourself better, because the more of that you do, the more you can help others.
Absolutely. The more you learn, the more you should get back. That's my mantra. Yeah. I had mentors, but I also did a lot of things on my own. Put myself up there constantly, and I learned from a lot of different failures in my life. So I want to make sure that people that do face similar barriers in life, I'm open to meeting them and just having a chat with them, telling them sort of the things that I went through, some of the things that they can implement to have a better life and not have to struggle the same way that I was struggling. Because a lot of us go through these periods of time where there's problems and problems and problems, and it just doesn't seem to end. But how do you overcome that, right? So you sometimes need that individual to just say, it's going to be okay. And you're going to overcome it.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned mentors. Tell me, if you would, about some of your mentors, your favorite mentors, and maybe some things that they helped with along the way.
Yeah.
I'll bet you have stories.
So Steve was actually my favorite mentor. So Steve was the person that first hired me for his small business. So they were a retractable awning company out of Milton, Ontario. And Steve taught me a lot of life lessons. So I used to sit next to him, and every time I would be picking up the phone call, it was his company. So every time I would, blunder, or there'd be some sort of problem with what I'm saying, he'd always try to encourage me to use different words or use different languages. And every time we would have a conversation, he'd also give me tips and advice. So I remember one time I was sitting down with him, and I was just asking him, how did you make it such a successful business? Like, how did you come up with this idea? And he said, Prince, you know, there's the time is money, but cost is a constant. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? He said, either you have a lot of money to make the business successful, or you're going to be spending a lot of time trying to make it happen. And sometimes at the end of the day, you're going to actually end up having cost either way, because it's either costing you your time or money. He said in his case, he was able to get an investor, and the investor was able to support him. But if he didn't have that, then he'd be spending a lot of time trying to get his product out there.
Yeah.
And he's always looking for that customer need the market need versus the customer need. So there's these things, these tidbits that he still tells me to this day, and I'm still in contact with him, even though I don't work for the company anymore. So Steve was one of my favorite mentors. And then I had a couple of other mentors, Daniel Bishan, Jennifer Vivian, who were also great mentors of mine when I worked at the city of Brampton. They really pushed me to become who I am. They really encouraged me to be more entrepreneurial, create events, do things out of the box, think like an entrepreneur rather than just think as a corporate individual. So they really became my good friends and colleagues, and they also pushed me to actually explore who I really am. And from that team, I learned that entrepreneurship was definitely for me, and I really enjoyed helping others and doing what I do today.
When you talk about entrepreneurship, what exactly does that really mean to you?
The term means, well, it can go a lot of different ways. But
yeah, that's why I asked.
Yeah. So 3 characteristics would be: number one, someone who takes moderate to high levels of risk, someone who's ambitious, and someone who has the mindset of consistently trying to solve a problem. So when I define an entrepreneur, it really falls under these 3 categories, because entrepreneurs need to have that. If you're the type of person that's going to give up really easily, entrepreneurship is not for you. If you don't have ambition for what you're doing, entrepreneurship is not for you. If you don't have the mindset of knowing that failure is going to happen, entrepreneurship is not for you. People think it's easy. They're like, okay, I'm going to start my own company and I'm going to make it very successful, but you're working long hours. Don't assume that you're going to work 40 hours a week. You're going to work maybe 60, 70 hours a week. This becomes your baby, and people have to now start calling you constantly to get sales or get your products, and you're always going to face these barriers. And who's going to manage that? You or a team member. But you're constantly on the call at that point. So entrepreneurship is not for everyone. It's for certain people that are willing to take that leap of faith, knowing that your life will completely change if this product or service becomes successful, and you're going to be spending a lot of hours making it happen.
And that's fair. And as long as you understand that as the entrepreneur, then and accept it, then you should be able to be comfortable in your skin and move forward.
Absolutely. And sometimes you do it, and then you realize, hey, you know what, this is not for me. And that's perfectly fine, right? Not like we were talking about earlier, you can't white label everything that you do in your life. It's, maybe you're passionate about it, and then you realize that it's not for you. And that's perfectly fine. Acceptance of things in this sort of nature, when it comes to small business especially, it's perfectly fine. You look to move on and get into something that you're a little bit more comfortable in.
Yeah, the other part about it is that you may face challenges, and they may cause you to doubt your self-worth. And you have to really take the time to analyze that and see what's really going on, because it may very well be a process that you need to address, rather than you're really not good at it, or you're not really an entrepreneur, or it could be the other way as well. But too often we don't really spend time every day just in an introspective world thinking about what went on and how do we make it better and what's going on in our lives. And we really ought to do that.
Absolutely.
There's always time to think. And we oftentimes, I hear it so often, well, I'm too busy. I don't have time to do that. Of course you do. You just don't want to make that a priority. And hello, let's talk about the challenges that you're facing.
Yeah. So in terms of my personal challenges,
Well, I mean, anybody,
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
general you, not you specifically, but you can
Yeah.
talk about you if you want. That's okay.
No, that's fine. I know I get what you mean. A lot of
Yeah.
people, yeah, you got to learn about your own personal challenges and the problems that you're facing and how do you overcome those.
Yeah. We need to, I think it's good to think about ourselves all the time. Where are we going? How are we getting there? What do we need to do to make tomorrow better than today?
Right.
It's okay. It's fair. Well, where do you see yourself in 5 years and going forward?
Yeah. So once I took my economic development and innovation program at Waterloo, I realized that economic development is it's a space where I really want to be. And I really see myself being a director in a company in the next 5 to 10 years. And I'm ambitious. I'm 32 years old, director at 32 years old. It's happened in the past. And over the next 5 years, I'm going to make it a goal to actually get to a higher post and really achieve that goal. So I'm going to set some milestones for myself in terms of things I want to achieve and things I want to accomplish in terms of my education and additional certifications that I might need.
Mm-hmm.
But my end goal in life is to reach a high post within a government organization.
I would only say don't ever forget that almost first and foremost, you're still a teacher.
Right.
And I think that's really important to be able to do. So I'm curious, you've used the term, and I appreciate it a lot, unstoppable mindset, a great deal. How does somebody gain that mindset? And for you personally, how did you overcome a lot of the fears and so on that really got you to have an unstoppable mindset and recognize it, which is, I think, very important?
Yeah, so I didn't really talk about it in the session today, but I deal with a lot of mental health issues, depression, anxiety. I have a little bit of ADD as well. I've realized through all the challenges I've faced in my life that no matter what you do, life is not going to stop for you. No one's going to stop for you and say, hey, let's rewind time and make a new decision based on what we've done in the past, because maybe we do want Prince, or maybe we do want to work with Prince. I realize that you have to set your own path and you have to set your own destiny. But if you don't commit to doing it every single day, you're not going to get where you want to be. It's just like going to the gym. If you go to the gym once for one time and then you go there for about 8-9 hours, you're not going to get fit. You're not going to get the muscles that you want.
Mm-hmm.
But if you commit yourself 30 minutes every day, you're going to get somewhere. You're going to eventually get the body that you want. It's the same thing with your mindset. Once you set your goal in terms of where you want to be, you want to make sure that your mind and your heart are driven to achieving those goals. And you try to find ways to get there. No matter how many times you fail, you keep picking yourself back up, because eventually someone's going to give you that chance and somebody's going to take the leap of faith in you and your abilities.
I think that one of the things that you said, though, that is extremely important is to always be humble, have humility. And when you're dealing with goals, when you're dealing with what you want to do, make sure that it's something that's not only going to benefit you, but I think it's important that it benefits other people too.
Humility is probably, and empathy are two of the most important skills, or not skills per se, but more assets that you need to own as an individual. If you're not empathetic, if you don't have humility, then you're not going to get the same level of respect, and then you're not going to get that same sort of recognition from the people around you.
Can anyone develop those traits in themselves?
They can, but they have to do a self-reflection to figure out, are they doing things the right way? When they talk to people, are they feeling empathetic? If a student is failing in a course, or if a client is struggling, are you going to say, well, this person is crazy, or this person doesn't work hard? Or do you try to find the problem and then try to figure out, how can I help this person achieve the results that they want to achieve? Anyone can do it. It comes down to the mindset of what you think you have versus what people think you have, and then trying to find that gap in between of what the optimal solution to that unstoppable mindset really is.
Mm-hmm. What kind of challenges do you still face every day that you have to work to overcome? Because I'm sure there are some, and you probably don't talk about them because you work on them, and maybe it's become so automatic. But you clearly probably have them.
Yeah, surprisingly, I struggle a lot with confidence, and I've struggled with it all my life. I used to get made fun of when I was younger. Uh, to this day, it still haunts me. I've gained a lot more confidence now. However, it's still something that when something doesn't go my way, I feel like I let myself down, and I feel like I'm the one solely responsible. But then I pick myself back up and say, you know what? Keep moving, keep moving. Let's try it again. It's a problem, but it's also one of my driving factors. If confidence is something I'm struggling in, I'm trying to figure out a way to make myself better. And it only comes down through self-reflection that I say, forget what my mind is thinking. Let's move on. Let's go to the next job. Let's go to the next interview. Let's go to the next student, whatever the situation is. And we try to really hone in on how can I do better next time? And then try it again. So even though I struggle a lot with confidence, I'm always trying to make myself try again until I really will feel comfortable, hopefully in the next coming years, in myself.
And that's really the key is you've made the decision, although you have to constantly work to maintain it like anyone should, but you've made the decision that when something happens that doesn't go just as planned, you're going to pick yourself up and move on from it and evaluate yourself and see what you need to do.
Exactly. And if you can do that as a human being, you're going to go really far. If you find where your struggles are and then you're able to pick yourself back up, nightmares never last and problems never last, right? Eventually you wake up and they're gone. And then you're in a situation where you're a lot better than where you used to be before.
As long as you keep that kind of an attitude and mindset, they won't last because the problems are only as big as you want to make them.
Exactly. And if you make a small problem a big problem, that's really your own mind playing those tricks at the end of the day.
Have you written any books?
Not yet, but it is something that I've thought about for a couple of years now, and it might be something that I do in the near future.
Well, you have to let us know when you have anything like that so we can talk about it some with you and certainly promote it as well. But how about, since you're doing a lot of teaching and coaching and so on, have you created any courses? Have you done anything or thought about online courses to also help businesses?
So I haven't done anything like that specifically, but you know what my real passion is? I struggled with confidence when I was younger, anxiety, and just presentation skills overall. And I actually want to create a business for kids in order to support them in terms of their own public speaking. So creating courses around that. So that's on the radar for me. Closer to retirement, I'm probably going to think about doing something like that because of all the experiences I'm going to gain over the coming years. But I'm really passionate about really helping kids gain that confidence and build themselves into working professionals, because I know myself, I never had that. And I always struggled with confidence. I always struggled with presentation skills. And there's a lot of people out there like me, but I was able to overcome it. And I want to train other people, especially kids that, nowadays with society, how depressing it is sometimes, get them to overcome that and say, you know what, you can be successful. You can present, you can be more confident in yourself, and help them build those skills. So that's what I'm really seeing myself in the near future as well, aside from the whole director role.
Sometimes, kids unfortunately get stifled by parents, so you have to train the parents as well. But kids are great sponges, and they're a lot sharper than a lot of people give them credit for. And if you can engage them and pique their interest, it doesn't get any better than that.
Absolutely. And they're fun. And they're fun to really engage.
Fun, yeah. They're absolutely fun, which makes a lot of sense. Well, I think it's important to really work to make that sort of thing happen. When do you want to retire?
Freedom 55.
Okay.
If that still exists.
23 years. Well,
Yeah, in 23 years, retire and then follow some of my passion projects that I've always wanted to do, which includes helping kids overcome fear of public speaking, give them more confidence. And I think
Cool.
that hopefully will become a reality in the next 23 years, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, see how it goes. Well, Prince, I want to thank you for being with us today. Do you have any kind of final thoughts or advice or words that you want to pass on to people?
Sure. So my advice would be to maintain a mindset that's unstoppable. I love the topic of this podcast because a lot of the presenters that come on here, they have that unstoppable mindset. And it's so valuable to keep going regardless of how much life throws sand at you or rocks at you. It doesn't matter what it's throwing at you. You got to keep moving forward. And my best piece of advice is no, bad times don't last. Good times will always come. Keep your head up, keep a positive mind, and keep moving forward because eventually you're going to get out of any problems or challenges you're facing and you're going to see the bright light at the end of the tunnel.
And that is such great advice. And I think that's something we should all keep in mind all the time and use it to grow and move forward.
Absolutely. And I look forward to seeing everyone succeed.
Well, thank you once again for being here. And if you know anyone else who you think ought to be a guest on our podcast who can talk about some of these same things or other things, please let us know, let them know, introduce us. We're always looking for people to be on Unstoppable Mindset. So I would really appreciate your help with that. As with you listening out there, if you know anyone that we ought to have on, love to hear from you. We appreciate it very much. And we appreciate your comments. Please give us a 5-star rating wherever you're listening to Unstoppable Mindset. We value those ratings a lot, but I also value hearing from you. So if you have the opportunity, I would really appreciate it if you'd send me an email, tell us your thoughts, tell us your observations. And as I said, introduce us to others. You can reach me at Michael H.I., MICHAELHI at Accessibe, ACCESSIBE.com. Or go to our podcast page, www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. Michael Hingson is MICHAELHINGSON. So michaelhingson.com/podcast. And Prince, how can people reach out to you if they'd like to talk with you more or maybe explore consulting with you?
Absolutely. So they can reach out to me via LinkedIn. So ECDev Prince is my tagline.
What is it again?
It's ECDev Prince, ECDEV Prince, PRINCE.
Okay.
Or email at prince.khan, KHAN @halton.ca.
Halton is HALTON.ca. Well, right. Great. Well, I hope people will reach out. I hope people will reach out to me. Love to hear from you. And again, love those 5-star ratings and all the input that you want to provide. And one last time, Prince, I want to thank you for being with us and looking forward to doing this again and certainly hearing about your new book when you start to write one or when you finish it.
I appreciate it, Michael. Thank you for having me today.